Don't mock. I'm not a fool. Don't mock. I'm not a fool.
I just think that would be fun.
Hey there, it's Coach Curl here, and as always, we're building a leadership revolution, and I'm the host of the Today's Leader podcast, and I'm also a host of the Dumb Leaders podcast, where we share some of those lessons that we've seen from lousy leaders. So today but what was the dumbest thing that you've ever seen a leader do? It might have been a leader that you reported to. It might have been a leader that you've seen. It might have been a friend of yours. It might have been you. And I want to start sharing one of the stories that I have. I had a 30-year leadership career, and I've been working in the leadership coaching space now for the last 10 years. So, of course, I've seen a number of different dumb things done by leaders. Hence the reason why I started the Dumb Leaders podcast. And one day it'll all become a book. It will all become a book called the Dumb Leaders Handbook. And I really believe that the way that we teach better leaders is to be sharing stories. And sometimes those stories are going to be powerful inspiration, and other times they're going to be immense lessons for us of what not to do. So today I want to share just one of the finals. This was my last ever corporate job. And I must say that this person ended up being the inspiration behind me becoming Coach Girl, behind me starting Think and Grow Business, behind me wanting to build tomorrow's best leaders today. The inspiration behind creating a leadership revolution, because it really is important that this is something that we do. We need better leaders, and we've been talking about this for a long, long time. And I guess with COVID, we've seen bad leadership multiplied in many, many cases. And you've probably got your own personal experiences of that. You've probably seen that firsthand. So whether it's politically, whether it's from a business sense, whether it's from a community sense, we've seen multiplication of bad leadership during the COVID crisis. But we've also had roles and jobs, and, you know, it doesn't take long for you to be on a social media platform and you're hearing and seeing some of the things that people have experienced from the leaders that they're reporting to. Some of it is just dumb. Some of it is through a place where they don't understand and where they haven't received the training, where they don't realise the impact, the negative impact that they have on others. You know, because some leaders fundamentally do try and they do give the best that they can possibly do. They just don't know the difference. And that can be really challenging for people to report to that particular leader. Because while they may have some good intentions, those good intentions may not be replicated in actually good deeds and good behaviours. And that's one of the biggest challenges. The leader I'm going to talk about certainly knew better. He'd been in his particular corporate role for quite a large period of time, and had identified his journey to get to where he was and get to where he believed he deserved to be. So a long corporate career, and as we know, in some organisations you get where you're going based around politics and who you know and those sorts of things. And this particular leader had certainly done that. He had achieved his position through political manoeuvring and not necessarily through any longevity of performance results or even the development of other leaders. You know, I always look at a leader and look to see the legacy of the leaders that are following behind them as something that should be celebrated and recognised. But in this particular case, there was no legacy of leaders. In fact, what this particular leader was recognising was totally wrong. Totally wrong. So he was, for example, within the team that I work for, and this was a large team, and we had a large portfolio. It would have been close to, we had 6 leaders that reported to this particular leader, and we would have had a combined portfolio in the billions of dollars. It was in the fuel game. So we're talking big revenue, we're talking big dollars, we're talking lots of sites and big dollars. And this particular leader didn't recognize the best performers within the team. He would recognize and have as what we call the golden child. He would recognize that particular person based on the fact that they connected on at a friend's level. He wasn't necessarily, he was far from being the best leader, far from creating. In fact, he had the worst results. But he was the one that was being set aside, mentored, developed to take on the next step. So this was an incredibly challenging position for every other leader in that particular team, because they saw that the results weren't there. They saw the leadership behaviours. They saw the example that this particular leader was setting, which was pretty ordinary at the best of times, and also saw that he was the one that was being invested in to become or take the next level step. Total disconnect to what you should be doing. But this particular leader that I speak about, and he's probably the motivation behind the Dumb Leaders podcast and the Dumb Leaders Handbook, and many of the articles that I've written where I've pinpointed some leadership lessons from lousy leaders. And the signs were there right from the very first day I actually joined this particular team. So as I was saying, this was a state-based, his was a state-based role, mine was a regional-based role. So I had a defined territory, and I had something like 23 sites within that defined territory, and that was my team. And it was my role to actually develop that particular region to be the best that it possibly could be, and a responsibility that I took incredibly serious. But on the very first day of joining this team, I remember going to the office, and of course when you join teams, there's an induction process, there's training to do, there's online stuff. So I was sat down, I'm a senior leader, I was sat down in front of a computer, I'm shown how to log in, which was, okay. And then told that this was, for the next 2 days, that's fundamentally what I'm going to be doing. I'm doing online training for 2 days. No connection with people, no understanding of other people within the team. I was going to be doing online training. And at the same time, this particular leader gave me what I have come to know as his handwritten manifesto. It was a scribbled piece of, a couple of pages of A4. So the positive is that he'd obviously taken the time to handwrite it and give all his new people into his team a photocopied version of the handwritten one. So at least I suppose there was a level of investment from him in relation to his handwritten manifesto. And he said to me, we'll catch up, Tony, we'll catch up later on today, and I will go through this and we'll talk about expectations and where I see you and all this sort of stuff. So, that's pretty exciting that a leader's going to invest some time on my first day it's probably normal too, it's probably good practice, but I was actually looking forward to that. I was thinking, new beauty, I get to understand my boss a little bit better, I get to understand the expectation. But that meeting never happened. It didn't happen on day 1. It didn't happen on day 300. So it never happened. And to this day, that's something that created a huge disconnect right from the word go. I'm going to do this, and we're going to sit down and we're going to talk about this. And then fundamentally, when the action or the behaviour or that meeting never happened, what else? It just puts down in your mind. It just puts a haze in your mind. What else is he going to say that's not going to come true? So day one. The other thing that happened on that very first morning, and this was about 8 o'clock in the morning, and I'd already been in there and I'd started on my computer work, and they called a meeting. They had, back in with this particular team, we would have an 8 o'clock Monday morning meeting where we'd review the results from the week before, we'd look at what's important, and we'd set a bit of a strategy or some priorities or some focus things to look forward to on that for the week coming. Now, everyone just got it, like we're in like an open office space, and we had like cubicles and whatnot, and everyone just got up at 8 o'clock and walked into the meeting room. Not one person, let alone the leader, took the time to say, because I had no idea this meeting took place. Not one person said, Tony, we've got a meeting, come on in. Not one. So here I am, locked into an online training program. I'm looking or reading something on the screen. I look around me and there's no one there. And my first thought is, my God, where's everyone gone? So, of course, I've got up and I've joined the meeting. And I've walked in maybe 5 minutes after, and I got a couple of smart-ass comments, you know what I mean. People just having a bit of a gentle dig. Oh, you choose to join us, did you? And like, first day. Like, serious? Do you want to tell me it's on? So anyway, that was my very first day, and the writing was on the wall. And I knew pretty much then that this was not going to be something that I was going to enjoy. And it was certainly not going to be an environment in which I could excel in. So really poor start to that working relationship. And then it got worse. He had a real capacity. It was like a superpower to shoot the messenger. So whenever someone provided him bad feedback or feedback on results or those sorts of things, something that leaders should be getting in their roles, right? So this is not like it's something new, that if we're not going to hit a target as a leader, I would prefer to know really as early as possible so that we can at least plan to see what we can shift and what we can change. I don't expect to get shot. I don't expect to have that whole concept of shoot the messenger play out in front of me. And this particular leader, the lousy leader that I speak of, did that. He would shoot the messenger on each and every occasion, like it was a personal insult that something had gone wrong. And so once again, when you think about leadership, leadership is fundamentally about bringing value to people, actually bringing value to people and organizations. And when you've got leaders that care enough to raise with the boss that, man, this isn't working as well as what it should be, they're looking for some guidance, they're looking for some coaching, maybe they're looking for some mentoring that's going to help them deliver what it is that they want to deliver. Very few people go to work with the aim of doing the worst possible job. So most people go to work wanting to succeed. It's part of the belief. But if you have a work boss that shoots the messenger every time, you're ultimately going to have and you're going to create a team that fly under the radar and that won't be talking. I'm always reminded of that Andy Stanley quote that says, when a leader stops listening to their team, they ultimately are left with a team with nothing to say. And it's a really one of those really vital learnings that we have as a leader, that we truly need to embrace and enhance that concept where we're getting feedback out of our team. So this particular dumb leader that I had always would shoot the messenger. He would take that personal feedback, the results or whatever it is, as a bit of a personal insult and would just jump down people's throats. And ultimately what you ended up with were people that would try and hide the results for as long as possible, or make excuses for results, or blame others. And so we ended up with this culture of blame. And once again, this was a real contradiction to what the leader spoke of. The leader always spoke about above the line leadership, that we've got to have ownership, accountability and responsibility, and then just didn't exhibit that at all, and didn't highlight that, didn't showcase that, didn't role model that. It was always blame, excuses and denial, all that stuff that sits below the line. So once again, a real disconnect between what was being said and what was being done. And once again, when you think back on maybe some of those lousy leaders that you've had, maybe you've seen something similar. Maybe you have seen people like that create a disconnect between what they say and what they do. And that is when we get teams that don't care, we get people that fly under the radar, and we get non-performance. And at the end of the day, you want performance as a leader. Whether it's your own personal performance or whether it's performance as a team. He would shoot the messenger whenever there was bad news or bad feedback, and he would look for a scalp. And that's a fear-based culture that is just not conducive to performance. It's just not conducive to performance. The other thing that I picked up really, really early, because as a person that reported to this particular leader, there was times where he would be out with me, like we would be either in his car or my car, and we'd be visiting some of my branches, some of the sites that I looked after. And during those conversations, I got to know this guy quite a bit, and most of it I didn't like, and one of the things that he would share quite often was how he was just not in the right role. He would speak ill of the people that he reported to. He would talk about the fact that he should be doing their jobs and that there should be a national role for him coming soon. And so there was this real delusional aspect to what he would talk to. And of course, that's the last thing you are wanting. Even if you do have a problem with your boss, that's the last thing you should be talking to with the people that report to you, right? That is the last thing. You want to create unity around what it is that the organization's trying to achieve. And so when he would always talk about the powers that be, I don't really believe we should be doing this, but the powers that be have said we need to be doing it. So he's watering down the commitment that he's giving it. So of course, people that report to a leader like that are going to water down the commitment, because their leader sees no value in what it is that we should be executing or what it is that we should be doing. So once again, there was this real disconnect between him saying that he should be running the organisation and then his commitment to the organisation, because he was bagging just about everyone above him and ultimately bagging any of the execution or the plans that were coming through. So it was really challenging environment to work and succeed in. There was disconnect, there was delusion, it was just a horrible environment. And of course, when his bosses came to visit, from the national office, you would then see a completely different behaviour altogether. You would see him being buddy, being best mates, all of that sort of stuff. And we would just sit back and say, so this is the guy that you were just bagging, last week. Now all of a sudden you're wanting it to appear that you're best mates. Are you serious? And of course we would see that, and that would impact performance. That would really impact performance. So don't ever minimize the impact that your behaviors as a leader does with the team that you lead. Now, as I've mentioned, I don't want this just to be a monologue from me. I really want to create some conversation. Let's talk about some of the dumb things or the lousy leaders that you've had, and maybe some of the learnings that you've had from those particular leaders, because I think that's the important part. We see lousy leaders, and maybe we try and influence lousy leaders, and we try and make them better, but there's always a learning. There's always a learning. I interview people on the Today's Leader podcast all the time, and I say, who's inspired you in your journey? And many times people say, you know what's inspired me, Tony? When I've seen leaders do the wrong thing. And that's created a picture in my mind of what I should be doing. So this is a concept that is used by many leaders to become better at what it is that they do. All right, so I hope I'm painting a little bit of a picture around this particular lousy leader and some of the things that happened to me that have actually made me a better leader. You know, the handwritten manifesto and missing the meeting. I would have made sure that if that was my team member, if that was my new manager that was joining my team, I would have made sure that I would have walked up to him and said, hey, we're just about to have a meeting. Let's go in. But no, nothing. He had nothing. And the first I knew there was a meeting going on was when I looked around the room and there was no one else in the room. Right? In the handwritten manifesto scenario, let's talk about this later. You know, after 19 months with that organisation, we never spoke of it. It was never mentioned again. And once again, a real disconnect there between what I said I'm going to do and what I actually did. We talked about how they shoot, how this particular leader shot the messenger. Whenever there was bad feedback, whenever there was bad results, we would be shot. We would fundamentally be shot. And as I said, he would go looking for a scalp. He'd go looking for someone to blame. He'd be looking at excuses. And many times you'd want to provide a bit of a preempt in relation to results, especially in an organisation. I think that's important. If you're not going to hit a target, the sooner you know about it, the better off you're going to be. And even if it is just to help with the reporting aspects of that missing the target, you're ahead of the game. And once again, being ahead of the game is just one of those things that I learned from a great leader. So it's really, really important that, you know, we may see or feel a dumb leader, but it's also incredibly important that we learn from it. You know, so talking behind his leaders' backs was just a real disconnection between what he wanted or expected from us and our commitment to the organisation. Because let's face it, we're not going to commit to an organisation when you have a leader that isn't committing to the organisation. So please understand your role in that as a leader and working with people that you want to have a positive influence on. There was a real team division in this particular gentleman's team. And it was based around geography. So for those people that know the southeast corner of Queensland here in Australia, we've got the Gold Coast and then we've got Brisbane. There's about 100 kilometres or 60 miles between those two locations. Half of the team lived on the Gold Coast and commuted daily to Brisbane, and the other half lived in Brisbane. Now, our leader lived on the Gold Coast. And what he would do on a regular basis was catch up with the Gold Coast, what he called the Gold Coast crew. He actually had a name for them, the Gold Coast crew, for coffee. And I think it was, if my memory serves me correct, it was about a Tuesday of every week. He would meet for an early morning session, 7:30 or 8 o'clock for a coffee. Okay? And he would never do that with the Brisbane-based team. Never. Not once did he say. And once again, he's creating an expectation or a thought process that the Gold Coast team were the favoured people. Now, regardless what's going on, regardless what we're seeing in the work, regardless what's being said, when you see a behaviour that is providing a perception back to people, and in this case, this was, I'm having a meeting every Tuesday with people that live close to me. But I'm not going to do the same to the people that live close to the office. So obviously there is a massive, massive disconnect with that. And he couldn't see it. He couldn't see how the team became. He would question, why is this team divided? And then never look at the behaviours that he actually did that created that division. So it was really fascinating. From a case study point of view, fascinating to observe. From a leadership coach perspective, fantastic opportunity to learn from and help others working through on this same patch, right? So being able to observe things and being able to observe yourself, like self-awareness is one of the best traits a leader can have. And if you don't have that, you are never going to look at what the problem actually usually is, and that's the leader. So please be aware of that as a leader or as someone that wants to influence or someone that's working with people. 9 times out of 10, I would say the problem rests with something you've done. And you need to have that awareness to be able to say, well, what have I done that's created this? This particular leader could never do that. So we had this real division within the team. Which was just really challenging because we had 6 people in that team who all wanted a career, who were all ambitious, and they just weren't being given any sort of equity of opportunity or any sort of equal opportunity. There was, as I said, there was the golden child who was the one that was being invested in, and then there was the rest of us who sort of became second-class citizens. And even on his Gold Coast crew, there were people that considered themselves second-class citizens, even though they were one step ahead of what we sort of knew as the Brisbane crew. So that's the dumbest thing that I've ever seen a leader continually do. Just continually not look within themselves and not see what the drama is. And you always had this sense, and I don't know if you've ever worked in a situation where you've always had a sense that the leader was actively working behind your back. Actively working behind your back. Always working in the background. And the reason why that sense was always there is because he would often call people in. And then you'd hear back from that other leader that the leader had found something wrong, or, and he had his little, let's use the term, he had some snitches in the next layer down who would openly share things or problems that they saw with their manager. And then as part of our leader's role, he would always then cane the leader or the manager based on the words of the person that was reporting to that particular leader. So you always knew that he was working to dig up dirt on you as a manager just so that he could use that to keep you invested in his promotion or ongoing future. So there was division, there was cynicism, there was mistrust, there was everything that you could possibly think could go wrong with a team went wrong with this particular team. And not once did that particular leader look internally and say, what role did I play in this? Because ultimately that's where the problem came. I hope wherever you are in the world, you're having an amazing day, and we'll talk soon. Bye.
Don't mock. I'm not a fool. And people who know me personally know that I am not a fool. But I won't get into the details of those. I just want people to realize that I'm not a fool. Don't mock. I'm not a fool. Don't mock. I'm not a fool.